This will be the first of 20 biographical videos of FW de Klerk, former President of South Africa, Nobel Peace Prize winner, the man who led South Africa from apartheid to non-racial democracy. And we will begin at the beginning, with the arrival of the de Klerk family in South Africa. FW, when did the de Klerks arrive in South Africa, and why?
Well, the de Klerk family, it was actually a widow and her 3 children, the eldest of which was Abraham de Klerk, which I regard as the stamfather of our family, arrived in 1688. They were French Huguenots who fled France, stayed for quite a long time in Holland, in a small place called Seerhooskerke, where they lived for almost a generation. And then they came to the Cape with all the other French Huguenots, 1688, 1689. They were Protestants. They were fleeing from religious oppression. So were all the other Huguenots. They brought a specific culture with them, which manifested in South Africa throughout its history.
Religion played a very important role in your own family, in the de Klerk family. I think by the middle of the 19th century, the de Klerks were established near Burgersdorp in the Eastern Cape. And I think your own grandfather grew up there, and he was one of the first students at the Dopper Gereformeerde Kerk Seminary. Is that correct?
Absolutely. My great-grandfather and his brother farmed together on a farm outside Burgersdorp called Spioenkop, Spy's Head. And my grandfather went to school there. They settled there shortly after the Great Trek started in 1834. Went to school there, went to theological seminar, and then the Anglo-Boer War broke out. Burgersdorp was in the Cape Province, which was a British colony. But my grandfather and some of his fellow students decided to join the war on the Boer side, on the Afrikaner side. He was soon caught up, unfortunately, as a Cape rebel. He even faced the risk of being hanged, but he escaped that, was in jail twice, and when the war was over, he went back to the theological seminar. Yes, we have a great history in the Gereformeerde Kerk. Later on, in the early 1900s, after the Boer War was over, the Burgersdorp seminar shifted to Potchefstroom, which was a small town about an hour's drive from Johannesburg. And he became the dominee there at a certain stage after he qualified, and then he also became the first registrar of the Potchefstroom University College for Christian Higher Education.
Now, the Gereformeerde Kerk is the smallest of the 3 Dutch Reformed churches. Also, its members are called Doppers. What is the difference? What's the difference between the Gereformeerde Kerk and the NGK, the Neder-Duitse Gereformeerde Kerk?
The Gereformeerde Kerk was formed in 1859 or 1869, suddenly I'm unsure. But it broke away on theological grounds. The Dutch Reformed Church, which was by then the biggest of the Afrikaans churches, brought in some Scottish ministers of religion. And some of the Methodist approaches to religion and to the Bible came into their teachings. And the stern Doppers, the stern Gereformeerders, militated against this. They brought in some hymns, whereas the Doppler only wanted to sing psalms. And that was the cause for the rift in the church and the establishment of the Gereformeerde Kerk. From that flowed the establishment of the theological school in Burgersdorp, which then shifted to Potchefstroom.
And now your father was also very closely associated with Potchefstroom University. I think he graduated there. He became a school teacher and subsequently very, very much involved in the National Party.
Yes, our whole family was thoroughly entwined with the Potchefstroom University. My father studied there, obtained a BA degree and a teacher's diploma, became a teacher, became a headmaster of a school, and in his mid-40s, he resigned and, with help of others, formed a trade union to protect white workers against cheaper black labor, which was threatening their jobs. From there on, he became the main organizer of the National Party in the province of Transvaal, as it was then known. From there on, he became a member of the Provincial Council and its executive. And in 1954, he was appointed as a minister in the cabinet by my uncle, who was married to my father's sister, Hans Strydom, and served under 3 consecutive prime ministers as a minister and then became president of our Senate. He was a good man. He had a tremendous charm. He had a good brain. But he firmly believed in apartheid. He put many laws on the statute book in the many portfolios he held. Laws which enshrined racial segregation. Laws which I would later, when I did the same portfolios as a minister before I became president, repealed myself. But I believe that he would have moved with me and with my brother. And he would have understood that we had to do what we did.
So you came from an intensely political family. Do you have any memories of your uncle, Hans Strydom, who was the second National Party Prime Minister after the National Party's surprise victory in 1948?
Yes, very much so. As a small kid, we used to go on holiday together to the Kruger National Park. He was a botanist as well. He was very well versed in nature. And often in the afternoon after lunch, when the other grown-ups in the party went to have a siesta, he would take me and his 2 children out in his personal car. He never used his official car as a minister on holidays, and would drive us around and would instruct us and give us wonderful information about what we could see. We were, of course, playing back in the car and not giving the attention we should have. Today, I'm sorry I didn't. He was a strong personality. He was called the Lion of the North. He had piercing blue eyes. He was a good speaker. He was a strong leader. But when he became Prime Minister, he was already seriously ill. He only lasted for 4 years.
Well, I suppose everybody is the product of their times. One must remember, when one considers the very strong white supremacy line that he took as Prime Minister, that this was a time when most of Africa was still under colonial domination.
Absolutely true. And fact is that we were preoccupied with the after effects of the Anglo-Boer War. The political debate was not as it should have been. What about the political rights of black South Africans, colored South Africans, and Indian South Africans. The political debate was still fiercely when I grew up as a youngster between Afrikaner and English, because of the misdeeds of the British Empire in the Anglo-Boer War, because of the concentration camps in which 26,000 women and children died and old people, because of the scorched earth policy which was followed by the British Army. There was bitterness, and we were preoccupied with that debate. And it is true that the rest of the world still applied apartheid in its own way without calling it apartheid. It was only in the mid-50s, and more or less at the time of the death of my uncle Hans Strydom, that the real debate about the liberation from colonialism started and spread throughout the world.
And in fact, I think your first memory as a child was going to the laying of the foundation stone of the Voortrekker Monument. So that was your first memory.
I was 2.5 years old. And my father, my brother, who was 8 years older, and I and my mother attended the laying of the cornerstone of the Voortrekker Monument. But because I was still very small, my father was carrying me on his neck, and I could see over the top of the heads of everybody. And the first visual memory I have of anything in life was that view which I had from my father's shoulders.
So you were born and raised as an Afrikaner nationalist.
Yes.
And in 1947, King George VI and Queen Elizabeth toured South Africa. What was your family's reaction?
It was a dual reaction. My mother wanted to see them. So she made herself a nice dress, bought a nice hat, and says she's going to meet the King and Queen and her children. My father said, no, I won't go at all. I'm going to plant some fruit trees on our small holding outside Krugersdorp. I had a choice. I chose to stay with my father and help him with the planting of the trees, and didn't accompany my mother. It was one of the first choices I had to make in my life. Many others followed.
So tell us a little bit more about your mother. She played a really formative role in your life.
Absolutely. My mother was a lady. She was beautiful. She was not academically highly trained. At her age, when she was a youngster, it was unnatural almost for a young lady to go to university. But she was very artistic. She emphasized the importance of being good and friendly and nice to everybody. She taught us that we should never look down on those who were less fortunate than us, to have respect for all elders, irrespective even of their race. She taught us how to have self-confidence. She was a good mother. I spent many months, even years, almost alone with her. My father, at a certain stage of his career, while we lived on that small holding, would come on Wednesdays home, leave again on Thursday, and then for the weekend. So I saw him twice a week. My mother and I stayed alone on the farm. I helped her in the garden, and we had wonderful times together. There was a close bond between us, and the same applied to my brother. She was a real lady, and later in my father's political career, when he became a minister and president of the Senate, she supported him in a wonderful way.
And your brother Willem, was 8 years older than you, so he was not in the scene most of the time. So it was you and your mother on the small holding near Krugersdorp. Tell us a little bit about your brother.
My brother was, as you say, 8 years older than me. He was almost a second father figure to me. He left when I was still very young for boarding school. And I only saw him now and then on weekends and then during his holidays. But we bonded. And he was, like my father, one of my mentors. He was an independent thinker. He and my father often argued at length at the dinner table. And I learned a lot from those arguments about the political issues of the day. My brother was more on the enlightened side. He was a reformist at heart. And he was a leading figure in the greater debate in which the Potchefstroom University, where he later became a professor, played an important role. The greater debate of where should we go? How should we liberalize our policies to make it fair to everybody? Because the original policy of apartheid would keep black South Africans forever in a sort of inferior position. And that militated against the sense of justice of many in the National Party. And there was a reformist movement within the Nationalist Party. And my brother was part of that. He was one of the leading figures in this debate when he later became a newspaper editor. He was a thinker. He was a forward-looking man. He was a bit of a loner. We sometimes teased him like that he was like John the Baptist out in the desert, preparing the ground.
And so you lived in a small holding and you grew peaches there. And I believe you sold peaches door to door.
For pocket money during my holidays, also when I was at university. I would load up my father's little car, take out the back seat, and go and sell it from door to door in Krugersdorp. Until I discovered there's an easier way. And I took the whole lot of fruit that I have in the car, and I took it to the old age home in Krugersdorp. And there I would sell it in 1 hour to everybody, and I became friends with so many of the old people.
And I suppose you also were helping your father with his political work. Were you going around from door to door with pamphlets for the National Party, or were you not really involved in that side of things?
No, when I was at high school, the early days of my high school, 1949, there was an election in which my father stood. And yes, I mobilized some of my friends, and we delivered the pamphlets into post boxes throughout town. And later on, I started a branch of the youth movement of the National Party at the high school, also at university when I went there. And yes, I was very active in a junior role, of course, but very active and very enthusiastic about becoming myself later on a politician. The one thing my parents taught me was life is not just about yourself. Life is about others. Life is about service. You're part of a community, and you must play a constructive role and help the rest of the community wherever you could. And I grew up with that ethic in my life. You must be of service and not only try to make money for yourself and build your own career.
Tell us about your school days.
I went to a very good high school. Well, firstly, my primary school days were very mixed up. We moved along in grade 7. I was in 3 schools in 1 year. And also in grade 4, I was in 2 schools in 1 year. So it was very mixed up. But then I went to Monument High School. I went to boarding school. It's a very good school. It's one of the most prestigious Afrikaans schools in South Africa still. 100 years old exactly this year of 2021. And I had good teachers and a good education. I was a bit of a rebel and a loner at school. Never became a prefect. I preferred my own small circle of friends. I wasn't a sportsman. wasn't a sports hero, and they were usually elected to be prefects. I didn't mind about that. I enjoyed my school days, but I hated the rigidity of all the rules and regulations, and I looked forward so much to finish my schooling and to go to university.
Were there any teachers that you had who made a great impression on you?
Yes, quite a number. One was my Latin teacher. It was my task always in class, when we weren't well prepared for a class, to distract him and to lead him into a debate about something else. And I was quite successful at that. And afterwards he would say, "You've done it again," and then give us double homework. But he had a great influence on me. And we had some teachers who were deeply involved in Afrikaans culture, in the SABC. They were voices in radio dramas, and they excelled in music, etc., etc. So yes, we had special teachers.
Our next episode will take us to FW de Klerk's university days and to his career as a young lawyer, and later to the establishment of his own legal firm in Vereniging.